All right, so you're looking to see how calculus is used out there in the business world. It's a great topic.
Yeah.
I can definitely see why you want a clear breakdown. We've got a really solid piece here called Business Applications of Calculus, Limits and Derivatives in Action. And while it won't turn you into some kind of calculus whiz, overnight, by the end of this deep dive, you should have a much better grasp on how companies use it.
It's amazing how calculus can really help you see those trends and patterns that aren't always so obvious. It's almost like having another lens to look at how businesses really work.
That's a great way to put it.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's jump right in. I think one of the most natural places to start is with this idea of profit optimization. After all, businesses are all about making money, right?
Absolutely. And calculus gives them a really precise way to find that perfect production level where profits are maximized. You can kind of think of it as pinpointing that exact spot on a graph, where the profit curve peaks.
Right, so instead of just guessing or going with their gut, they can use calculus to get a more concrete answer.
Exactly. For example, our source material talks about a company that has a specific revenue and cost function. Now, without going into all the really complicated math by using derivatives, they can figure out that producing 75 units is going to give them the highest profit possible.
Wow, so they can just skip all that trial and error and go straight to the best option. That's pretty powerful.
It really is. And you can actually apply a really similar concept to minimize costs as well. It's all about, finding that balance between making the most money while keeping costs down.
That's where the idea of marginal cost comes in, right? It's
Yep.
not just about overall cost, but how much each extra unit affects their bottom line.
You got it. So let's say a company is using a cost function like, and I won't bore you with the specifics, C of x equals 100x plus 20x squared. The derivative of that function, or the marginal cost, ends up being 100 plus 40x.
Okay, so what does that actually tell them?
Well, as they produce more and more units, that marginal cost keeps going up. This could be like an early warning sign that things are becoming less efficient. Maybe they're hitting their capacity limit or supply chain problems are starting to creep in. It's a way to look beyond just the raw numbers and, see those subtle shifts that might be affecting their costs.
That's really interesting. It makes me think about how this idea applies outside of just business. Like, if you're a freelancer taking on more and more clients, there's probably a point where each new project might actually start costing you more in terms of time and stress.
Absolutely. It really highlights how these concepts from calculus can apply to all kinds of different situations.
Okay, so we've looked at profit and costs, both super important for any business. But what about something like inventory management? I'm guessing calculus probably has a role to play there too, right?
You're exactly right. Inventory management is all about finding that sweet spot. You don't want too much stock just sitting around, but you also don't want to run out and disappoint your customers. Calculus can help you find that balance.
So how does it do that? Is it more complex equations again?
Well, there are equations involved, but the key concept here is something called limits. Limits let businesses model what happens as their inventory levels get really close to zero. Imagine a retailer seeing that demand for a product is steadily decreasing over time. They have a function, let's say, of d of t equals 500 minus 20, where tit represents time.
Okay, so they can plug in different values for TIT to see how demand is going to change in the future.
Yes, but they can also use calculus to determine the rate of that change. In this example, the derivative is negative 20, meaning that demand is dropping by 20 units each day. That kind of precision helps them make smart decisions about restocking, making sure they have enough product without going overboard.
So it's like they're not just reacting to what's already happened, but looking ahead and anticipating what's coming next.
Exactly. And when you consider the scale of some companies, like Amazon with their huge inventory operations, it's easy to see how these tools are absolutely crucial for keeping everything running smoothly.
It's really amazing how much math is happening behind the scenes of everyday life.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what else we discover.
There's a lot more to explore. This is really just scratching the surface when it comes to how businesses are using calculus to their advantage.
I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
So far, we've seen how calculus can help with things like optimizing profits, managing inventory. It's like this secret language of efficiency. But what about like forecasting future trends, looking ahead? I'm guessing calculus is useful there too.
You're right on the money. Forecasting and trend analysis is where things get really interesting. It's like using calculus to get a glimpse into the future of a company.
Okay, I like that. So how does that actually work?
Well, imagine you're tracking a company's revenue over time. There's this idea in calculus called a horizontal asymptote. And it's kind of like a ceiling on their growth. It shows the maximum revenue they could ever reach, even if they just kept growing forever.
So it's not that they'll actually ever hit that ceiling?
Yeah.
but it gives them a sense of their potential.
Exactly. It helps them set realistic expectations and make those long-term plans. For example, our source mentions a company with a specific revenue function. We don't need to get bogged down in the actual equation, but as their production keeps increasing, their revenue gets closer and closer to a certain value. Let's say it's $10 million. That would be their horizontal asymptote, like the upper limit on their revenue.
That's a pretty powerful insight, like having a long-term compass for their business.
It really is. And this kind of analysis can be applied to all sorts of trends, not just revenue. You could forecast market share, customer growth, even how fast a new product is adopted.
We talked about supply chains earlier, and I'm thinking calculus probably plays a big role in making those better too, right?
Absolutely. Supply chain optimization is about finding the most efficient way to get products from one place to another. Like, think about Amazon. They're moving millions of products every single day. Calculus helps them figure out the best shipping routes and even how much to ship at once to keep costs down.
So they're not just winging it. There's actually serious math going on behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah, tons of it. They might have a delivery cost function that considers things like distance, fuel costs, even the number of items in a shipment. By using derivatives, they can figure out exactly how much to ship at once to spend the least amount of money.
Makes sense. Every little bit of efficiency counts when you're dealing with those massive operations. Okay, but let's switch gears for a second. We've talked about production, costs, inventory, forecasting, even shipping. But what about pricing strategies? How does calculus help companies decide how much to charge for their products?
Pricing is a really interesting area where calculus can have a big impact. It all comes down to understanding the relationship between price and demand. Economists call this elasticity. Some products are really sensitive to price changes, like gasoline, while others are less affected, like maybe a luxury car.
Right, so if the price of gas goes up even a little bit, people might drive less or look for other options. But with a luxury car, the price might not matter as much.
Exactly. And calculus gives us tools to really measure that relationship, to figure out how much demand changes when the price changes.
So instead of just guessing, they can use calculus to find the sweet spot, where they're maximizing revenue but not turning away customers.
Exactly. They might have a demand function that tells them how many units they'll sell at different prices. And by finding the derivative of that function, they can pinpoint the exact price that will bring in the most revenue.
So we've seen how calculus can help companies improve almost every part of their business. It's really amazing how powerful these tools are. But before we wrap things up, I have to ask, are there any uses of calculus in business that might surprise people? Something they wouldn't necessarily expect?
Yeah, we've covered so much ground, everything from optimizing those profits to managing inventory, forecasting, even setting prices. It's really clear how much calculus can do for businesses. But are there any ways it's used that might surprise people, something they wouldn't really expect? Oh, definitely. Calculus can pop up in some pretty unexpected places. Like, have you ever thought about how information spreads online? Think of those trends on social media, or how news goes viral.
I never really thought about it in terms of math. But now that you mention it, it makes sense there'd be patterns there.
Exactly. And those patterns can actually be modeled using something called differential equations, which are a big part of calculus. These equations help us see how things change over time, like how quickly a post gets shared or a rumor spreads.
So companies can use calculus to understand how information moves through their networks. Maybe even predict which campaigns will go viral.
You got it. They can analyze how their message is shared, see who the influencers are, and make their content reach as many people as possible. It's all about using calculus to understand how social networks work.
It's amazing that these tools from calculus, that can seem so abstract,
Yeah.
can be used for something as human as how we interact online. It really shows how math is everywhere in our lives.
It really does. And it just goes to show how important it is to have even a basic understanding of these ideas. Even if you're not like a mathematician, knowing how calculus is used in business can give you a real edge in today's world.
For sure. This deep dive has given me a whole new perspective on how powerful and flexible calculus can be. I'm starting to see it everywhere I look.
That's what's so cool about it. Once you understand those basic ideas, you can't unsee them. And who knows, maybe it'll even make you want to crack open those old textbooks and dive back into calculus.
I just might. And to our listener out there, I hope this deep dive has been as eye-opening for you as it has been for me. It's clear that calculus isn't just something theoretical, just for the classroom. It's a powerful tool that's shaping the business world and all our lives in ways we may not realize.
Well said. And this is really just the beginning. There's a whole world of math out there to discover. So stay curious and never stop learning.
Great advice. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of business calculus.